She had 3 hours to live as a free woman, not because she was dying, because she was marrying. On the morning of May 3rd, 1481, in a palace chamber in Constantinople, a young concubine named Siakatan received news that would shatter 2 empires. Her son, a 21-year-old son, had just learned his father was dead. Sultan Mehmed II, the conqueror of Constantinople, dead at 49. And now, 2 sons would fight for the throne. Sisek had raised a prince, but she had made one catastrophic mistake during his childhood. One decision on a wedding night 22 years earlier, one moment of political miscalculation when she chose the wrong alliance, the wrong family, the wrong bride for her infant son. That mistake would hand Europe 13 years of leverage against the Ottoman Empire. This is how it happened. This is not a love story. This is not a tragedy. This is a historical hostage crisis that began with a wedding bed and ended with the Pope holding an Ottoman prince for ransom. In the next 20 minutes, I will show you the palace politics that weaponized marriage, the mother who bet on the wrong bride, the civil war that tore an empire apart, the knights who turned a refugee into their most profitable prisoner. Before we begin, subscribe because this history was deliberately erased from textbooks. The clock is already ticking. Sitya Hatun was not Turkish. Most concubines in the Ottoman harem were not. Slavic, possibly. Circassian, maybe. The records deliberately obscure her origins. What the records do not obscure, her ambition. When she gave birth to Sazem in December 1459, she understood the game immediately. The Ottoman Empire did not operate on primogeniture. The throne did not automatically go to the eldest son. It went to the strongest, to the son with the best military record, the most loyal pashas, the most strategic marriage alliances. So when Sem was still an infant, Sisek began building his network. She arranged betrothals. She cultivated relationships with powerful viziers. She selected a bride from the Karaman dynasty, one of the most powerful Anatolian families still resisting full Ottoman control. The marriage happened when Sem was barely 7 years old. It was brilliant strategy. Karaman loyalty meant Anatolian support. Anatolian support meant military strength. Military strength meant throne. Except Siak made one fatal miscalculation. She assumed Mehmed II would live long enough for Sem to build an adult power base. She assumed her son would have time to consolidate those Karaman alliances into real political force. She assumed wrong. Mehmed II died suddenly on May 3rd, 1481. Sem was 21. His half-brother Bayezid was 33, and Bayezid had something Sem did not. Not better military strategy, not more battlefield experience, not even more sons. Bayezid had married differently, his mother had chosen differently, and that difference was about to ignite a civil war that would make European Christians richer than any crusade ever did. Ottoman royal marriages were not about love. They were not even about heirs. The sultans already had concubines for that. Royal marriages, legal, ceremonial, politically binding marriages, were about one thing: preventing threats. Bayezid's mother was a woman named Gulbahar Hatun. Some sources call her Amina Gulbahar. Others suggest she was of Albanian or Greek origin. What matters is not her ethnicity. What matters is her understanding of Ottoman paranoia. Here is what she understood. The greatest threat to any sultan was not external enemies, it was internal rivals. Sons, brothers, nephews. Any male with a drop of royal blood and an army. So Gulbahar did not marry her son Bayezid to a powerful Anatolian family. She married him to daughters of loyal viziers, men who already served the sultan, men whose power depended entirely on imperial favor, men who could not rebel. Sem's Karaman in-laws? They had their own armies, their own territories, their own ambitions. Marrying Sem to Karaman nobility meant creating a prince with an independent power base. That is exactly what you do when you are building a future sultan. That is exactly what you do not do when the current sultan might die unexpectedly. When Mehmed II collapsed on May 3rd, 1481, the viziers in Constantinople faced a choice: support the younger prince with dangerous independent alliances, or support the older prince whose wives' families depended on the empire's stability. They chose Bayezid. But here is what Chisek understood that Gubahar did not. The Janissaries, the elite slave soldier corps, did not care about marriage politics. They cared about money, about power, about which prince would reward them most generously. And Chisek had spent 20 years making sure those Janissaries loved her son. So when Bayezid's supporters tried to keep Mehmet's death secret, the Janissaries found out anyway, and they were furious. Grand Vizier Karamanli Mehmet Pasha made a decision that would cost him his life. When Mehmet II died, the vizier ordered the body transported slowly, very slowly, from the military camp where the Sultan had collapsed, back to Constantinople. 3 days of delay, not for mourning, for logistics. Islamic law requires immediate burial, but Karamanli Mehmet Pasha violated that law deliberately. He needed time. Time for a messenger to reach Sem in Konya, 240 miles away. Time for Sem to reach Constantinople before his brother, because under Ottoman succession law, the first prince to reach the capital and secure the treasury usually won. Bayezid was in Amasya, 440 miles away. The math was simple. Except the Janissaries found out. They discovered the conspiracy, they discovered the delayed funeral, they discovered that their Grand Vizier was trying to install a prince with Karaman loyalties, a prince whose in-laws had fought the Ottomans for decades. On May 20, 1481, the Janissaries stormed the palace. They found Karaman Mehmet Pasha in the treasury. They dragged him into the courtyard. They tore him apart with their bare hands. Then they sent word to Bayezid, "Come now, the throne is yours." Bayezid arrived in Constantinople on May 21st. He was declared Sultan Bayezid II. 6 days later, on May 28th, Sem captured the city of Inagole with 4,000 troops. He declared himself Sultan of Anatolia. He proposed splitting the empire. Bayezid could keep Europe. Sem would rule Asia. Bayezid's response entered Ottoman historical records as 5 words: "Between rulers there is no kinship." On June 20th, 1481, near the town of Yenişehir, the two armies met. Sem lost. Not the battle, the war. And that is when the Christians got involved. Sem ran, first to Cairo. The Mamluk Sultan received him with honor, gave him money, let him make the pilgrimage to Mecca, making Sem the only Ottoman prince in history to complete the Hajj. But the Mamluks could not risk war with Bayezid, so when Sem tried to invade Anatolia again in 1482 and lost again, the roads to Egypt were blocked. Sem needed refuge, fast. On July 29, 1482, he sailed to Rhodes. The Knights Hospitaller were a Catholic military order, crusaders, technically, though the age of crusades was dying. They controlled Rhodes, a fortified island that had survived an Ottoman siege just 2 years earlier. Their Grand Master was Pierre d'Aubusson, a French nobleman, a brilliant strategist, and the moment C stepped onto Rhodes, d'Aubusson understood what he possessed. Not a refugee, a weapon. Sem offered a deal. "Help me retake the throne, and I will guarantee perpetual peace between the Ottomans and Christendom." D'Aubusson made a counter-offer to Bayezid. In March 1483, a secret agreement was finalized. The knights would keep Sem imprisoned, protected, in the diplomatic language, in return for 40,000 ducats per year. 40,000 gold ducats. Every year, just to keep one prince locked up. Bayezid agreed instantly. The price of keeping his brother captive was far cheaper than fighting a civil war. Sem became the most profitable prisoner in Europe. For the next 7 years, he was moved between castles in France. Well treated, well fed, taught French, allowed to write poetry in Turkish and Persian. But a prisoner. In 1489, Pope Innocent VIII demanded custody. The knights agreed for a fee. When Sem arrived in Rome on March 13, 1489, the Pope inherited the annual payment, 40,000 ducats, plus bonuses, plus gifts from Bayezid, 120,000 crowns up front, 100 Moorish slaves, and a piece of the Holy Lance, the spear that supposedly pierced Christ's side. Much of the Sistine Chapel's decoration was funded with Ottoman ransom money to keep one prince in a Roman palace, and the Pope was just getting started. Every time Bayezid II planned a military campaign into Europe, Pope Innocent VIII sent the same message: "Attack, and I release your brother." It worked. In 1490, when Bayezid prepared to invade Hungary, the Pope threatened to give Sem an army and a crown. Bayezid withdrew. In 1492, when Ottoman forces gathered near the Venetian territories, the Pope wrote again. Bayezid paid another tribute. Sem was not just a prisoner. He was a deterrent, a human shield. A pause button on Ottoman expansion into Europe. For 13 years, Europe bought peace by threatening to start a civil war. But here is what makes this truly calculating. The Pope never intended to release Sem. Releasing Sem meant one of two outcomes. Either Sem would win, and Pope Innocent VIII would lose his annual payment, or Sem would lose and die, and Pope Innocent VIII would lose his annual payment. Keeping Sem alive and imprisoned was infinitely more profitable than any military outcome. The Vatican records show the financial dependency clearly. By 1494, the 40,000 ducats from Bayezid equaled the combined total of almost all other papal revenue sources. One hostage prince generated as much income as the entire Catholic Church's European operations. Ottoman historians later called this period the Sem crisis, not because Sem threatened Bayezid militarily. Sem's armies had been crushed in 1481 and 1482, but because Sem's existence threatened something more dangerous than soldiers. He threatened the legitimacy. As long as Sem lived, Bayezid's claim to the throne could be challenged. Every military defeat, every economic crisis, every drought or plague. Opponents could whisper, if Sem was Sultan, this would not have happened. Bayezid could not fight Europe, because fighting Europe meant giving Europe a reason to crown his brother. He was trapped. And it started because two mothers chose different brides. Not every European wanted Sem imprisoned. Charles VIII of France had a different plan. In 1494, the young king invaded Italy. He wanted the kingdom of Naples. He wanted glory. And he wanted to lead a crusade against the Ottoman Empire, with Sem as his puppet sultan. Charles marched into Rome and demanded Pope Alexander VI Innocent VIII's successor hand over the Ottoman prince. On January 28, 1495, Sem left Rome with the French army. He was 35 years old. He had been a prisoner for 13 years. More than a third of his life spent in castles, palaces, and gilded cages. Now he was finally moving. Finally traveling with an army. Finally, possibly, heading toward Constantinople. 27 days later, Sem Sultan died in Naples. February 25, 1495. The official cause, fever. The rumor that spread immediately, poison. Administered by Pope Alexander VI, Rodrigo Borgia, who could not afford to lose his most valuable revenue stream. We will never know the truth. Sem's body was not autopsied. By the time modern forensic methods existed, his remains had been moved multiple times. But we know this. When Bayezid II received the news, he declared 3 days of national mourning. Then he requested the body. It took 4 more years for Sem's corpse to be returned to Ottoman lands, because European nobles kept trying to extract more gold for the privilege. Sem was finally buried in Bursa in 1499. 14 years after his rebellion, 18 years after the wedding alliances that set everything in motion, Siyet Hatun outlived her son by 3 years. She died on May 3, 1498, exactly 17 years to the day after her former lover, Sultan Mehmed II, had died and started the succession crisis. The records do not say where she was buried. They do not describe a funeral. They do not mention mourning. She simply disappears from the historical record, because in the Ottoman system, a concubine's value ended when her son died. No son meant no power. No power meant no protection. No protection meant no memory. Sisek spent the last 3 years of her life knowing her gamble had failed. Her son died in a foreign land, poisoned or diseased, prisoner of Christians, never having ruled a single day. The bride she chose for Sem the Karaman princess vanishes from records even earlier. We do not know her name. We do not know what happened to her after Sem fled in 1482. Gulbahar Hatun Bayezid's mother fared better. She lived in the palace, watched her son rule for 31 years, saw her grandson Selim eventually seize the throne in 1512. She died in comfortable obscurity. Ottoman historians barely mention her, because she did exactly what a sultan's mother was supposed to do: stay invisible, stay silent, and secure the throne. The difference between Sikia and Gulbahar was not intelligence, not ambition, not even strategy. It was timing. Sisek chose a marriage alliance that needed 20 more years to mature. Mehmed II died 15 years too early. Gulbahar chose marriages that made her son dependent on the imperial system. When Mehmed II died unexpectedly, the system chose stability. In the brutal calculus of Ottoman succession, Sisek's brilliance became her fatal flaw, and Sem paid the price. But the consequences did not end with their deaths. In 1522, 41 years after Sem's rebellion, Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent besieged Rhodes, the same island where Sem had sought refuge, the same Knights Hospitaller who had turned him into a commodity. The siege lasted 6 months. The knights fought brilliantly, but they could not fight 100,000 Ottoman soldiers with just 7,000 defenders. On January 1st, 1523, the knights surrendered and sailed away. Suleiman granted them safe passage, unusual mercy for a sultan. But Ottoman historians noted something peculiar. During the negotiations, Suleiman mentioned Sem Sultan by name, mentioned the dishonor of 1482, mentioned the debt that Rhodes owed the Ottoman dynasty. This was not just conquest, this was revenge. Delayed by 4 decades, but revenge nonetheless. And revenge for what? For selling a prince to Christians? For turning a civil war into a European payday? No, revenge for something deeper. For proving that Ottoman princes could be bought, that Ottoman succession could be manipulated by foreign powers, that a mother's choice of bride could put an entire empire at the mercy of the Pope. Suleiman expelled the knights to make a statement: never again. Never again would an Ottoman prince be held hostage by Christian powers. Never again would succession disputes be resolved in European courts. Never again would marriage politics give foreign nations a weapon against the empire. The Sem crisis had taught the Ottomans a brutal lesson, and in 1522 they made sure Europe learnt it too. But there is one final twist to this story. Sem Sultan had at least 5 children, 3 sons, 2 daughters, possibly more. When Bayezid II secured the throne, he followed custom. Rivals were eliminated. Sem's 2 youngest sons, Thezad Abdullah and Thezade Olgojan, were executed before 1483. One son survived, Murad. He fled Europe with his father, lived in exile, converted to Christianity, took the name Pierre Mehmed Said, married a Frenchwoman. It did not save him. In 1522, during the siege of Rhodes, Sultan Suleiman ordered Murad executed. Even converted, even Christian, still a threat. But Murad had children, 7 of them. Sem's bloodline survived in France, Italy, Malta, descendants of an Ottoman prince who never ruled, who died defeated, who became Europe's most valuable hostage. Some of his descendants later fought against the Ottoman Empire. Great-grandchildren of Mehmed the Conqueror, fighting for Christian Europe, because succession was never about blood, it was strategy. Europe learned something from Sem Sultan. Imprisoning an Ottoman prince was more profitable than fighting Ottoman armies. From 1481 onward, every Ottoman succession crisis became leverage. Rebels were sheltered, princes protected, claims encouraged. For a price, The Knights Hospitaller earned over 520,000 ducats holding Sem. The papacy earned even more, all from one defeated man. The precedent lasted 4 centuries. Whenever the empire fractured, Europe threatened recognition of alternatives. Sem was the first proof that legitimacy could be weaponized. And it all began with marriage politics. 2 mothers, 2 alliances, 2 outcomes. One decision created a prince with independent power. That prince launched a civil war. That war created a hostage. That hostage reshaped diplomacy. Europe never forgot the lesson. The Ottomans never forgave it. Some historians say this is overstated. Bayezid still expanded the empire. Payments were manageable. True, but this was never about money. It was about legitimacy. For 13 years, Europe possessed a living alternative to the Sultan. That threat constrained the empire more effectively than armies, and it began not on a battlefield, but in a marriage arrangement. One choice. One alliance. Decades of consequence. Tia Khatun's home is gone. Modern Istanbul covers it. No marker shows where she made her decision, but its effects shaped empires. So ask yourself, if one marriage calculation in 1460 could alter history for generations, what decisions are we making now that will echo long after we are gone? Subscribe. The stones remember. We are walking on them.